Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, January 3rd, 2025. 119th Congress convenes and House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, wins re-election in a dramatic vote that had him initially losing before two House Republicans switched their votes and gave him the minimum 218 total votes he needed for victory. On the Senate's first day of the new Congress, the new Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, vows to preserve the legislative filibuster and, in his words, ensure the Senate stays the Senate. President Joe Biden blocks Japan-based Nippon Steel's purchase of U.S. steel, writing, "We need major U.S. companies representing the major share of U.S. steelmaking capacity to keep leading the fight on behalf of America's national interests." White House says President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will be traveling to New Orleans on Monday after this week's deadly truck ramming attack inspired by ISIS. And a briefing on increased security in Washington, D.C. ahead of high-profile events next week, including counting the Electoral College vote in the presidential election and the funeral of former President Jimmy Carter. ABC News writes, in some high-stakes political drama, the House of Representatives on Friday voted to re-elect House Speaker Mike Johnson to lead the 119th Congress. Johnson, a Louisiana Republican who was ascended to the leadership post in 2023 after the historic ouster of Kevin McCarthy, had secured President-elect Donald Trump's support as he sought a second term. But Johnson's handling of the government spending fight just before Christmas angered some of the GOP's right flank. 3 Republicans initially defected from Johnson during the vote, but 2 ultimately changed their votes to hand him the gavel. That was from ABC News. The 2 that flipped were Ralph Norman of South Carolina. He initially voted for Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, to be Speaker, and the other, Keith Self of Texas, who initially voted for Congressman Byron Donalds, Republican of Florida, to be Speaker. The 3rd Republican who didn't vote for Johnson, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, voted for another congressman, Tom Emmer, Republican of Minnesota, to be Speaker, and didn't change his vote, stayed with that. After the election, President-elect Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, congratulations to Speaker Mike Johnson for receiving an unprecedented vote of confidence in Congress. Mike will be a great leader, and our country will be the beneficiary. The people of America have waited 4 years for common sense, strength, and leadership. They'll get it now, and America will be greater than ever before. Right after the 2 House Republicans changed their votes, and right before the then acting House Clerk, Kevin McCumber, announced the results, C-SPAN spoke on the phone with Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican of Tennessee.
2 members, one had voted for Jim Jordan. I think the other one voted for Byron Donalds, and they just flipped their vote. There was a question of whether the vote had been called or not, and so I guess they decided. The parliamentarian said they had not called the votes, but now Speaker Johnson is Speaker Johnson once again.
On the first vote, we saw Mike Johnson, Keith Self, and Ralph Norman walk off the floor together in a trio. What was that conversation about? Do you know, Mr. Burchett?
I would say it was where they wanted to be philosophically and what they needed to get that vote.
Now, you were on the list of questionables for Mike Johnson. I hate to characterize you,
okay.
But
No.
Is that a fair characterization?
That's a very fair characterization. I
and
prayed
you
about it, and I figured out what I needed to do.
Why did you support Mike Johnson on the first ballot?
Because he's never lied to me, and I know where he's at philosophically. We just need to support him more in the conservative causes. And I think he's going to be a great speaker.
Tim Burchett, Republican of Tennessee, we appreciate your spending a minute with us. The House is back in session.
Of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 218. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 215. And the Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. Therefore, the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 119th Congress.
Kevin McCumber, the House Clerk, announcing that total. After the Speaker election, the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, introduced Speaker Johnson.
House Democrats will work hard to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues in the incoming administration on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for everyday Americans. For far too long in this country, the cost of living has gone up, but the size of the middle class has come down. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Childcare costs are too high. Insurance costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. America is too expensive. There are far too many people in this great country who for decades have been struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. That is not acceptable in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We need to build an affordable economy for hard-working American taxpayers, and we need to build it now. It's time for us to come together and finally lower the high cost of living in the United States of America once and for all. And we will work with anyone of any party to get that done. We will work with anyone to secure our borders, and we will work with anyone to fix our broken immigration system in a comprehensive and bipartisan manner. At the same period of time, we will push back against far-right extremism whenever necessary. So let me be clear, Social Security and Medicare are not entitlement programs. They are earned benefits.
The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, during the 119th Congress opening session today, as he introduced the reelected Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana. Speaker Johnson, in his acceptance speech, spoke about some of the policy items the Republican Congress plans to pursue with soon-to-be President Donald Trump.
In coordination with President Trump, this Congress will give our border and immigration enforcement agents the resources that they need to do their job. We will secure the border, we will deport dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, and finally finish building the border wall. You said you'd work with us on that, Hakeem. I'm counting on it. After 4 years of high inflation, we have a big agenda. We have a lot to do, and we can do it in a bipartisan fashion. We can fight high inflation, and we must. We'll give relief to Americans, and we'll extend the Trump tax cuts. We're going to protect our industries from one-sided trade deals, and we're going to bring overseas investments back to America's shores. That's right. We'll defeat the harmful effects of inflation, and we'll make life affordable again for America's hardworking people. As leaders of a nation with vast natural resources that God has blessed us with, it is our duty to restore America's energy dominance, and that's what we'll do. We have to apply common sense. We have to stop the attacks on liquefied natural gas, pass legislation to eliminate the Green New Deal, that funding. We're going to expedite new drilling permits. We're going to save the jobs of our auto manufacturers, and we're going to do that by ending the ridiculous EV mandates. And as heirs to the American Revolution and the descendants of patriots who defied tyranny, in the coming months, we are going to pass legislation to roll back the totalitarian fourth branch of government known as the administrative state. We're going to drastically cut back the size and scope of government. We're going to return the power back to the people. And in coordination with President Trump and his administration, we are going to create a leaner, faster, and more efficient federal workforce. We need to do that.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, speaking in the House chamber after being reelected Speaker for another term. The Hill newspaper writes that President-elect Donald Trump called two of the final Republican holdouts before they switched their votes in support of Speaker Johnson. Sources told The Hill, underscoring the incoming president's influence in the House GOP conference. Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican of South Carolina, who initially voted for Jim Jordan, and Keith Self, Republican from Texas, who initially voted for Byron Donalds, both confirmed that they spoke with Trump Friday afternoon after withholding their support from Johnson, a posture that would have left the Louisiana Republicans short of the Speaker's gavel. Both lawmakers are members of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. In a statement on X afterwards, Congressman Self said he changed his vote after receiving assurances from Speaker Johnson regarding fiscal responsibility. He wrote, "My sole focus was advancing the Trump agenda. To ensure this, I expressed concern to Speaker Johnson about fiscal responsibility and holding the line on deficit spending, key priorities for my constituents. After receiving firm assurances from the Speaker, the Republicans in the House will have strong representation during the budget reconciliation process, a cornerstone of President Trump's agenda. I changed my initial vote." Returning to the roll call vote for Speaker for just a moment, after the House reading clerk went through alphabetically the entire list of those eligible to vote, representatives from states, Stacey Plaskett, a non-voting congressional delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands, a Democrat, asked why she and the other delegates were not allowed to vote for Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
Speaker, I have a parliamentary inquiry. I note that the names of the representatives from the Americas Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia were not called, representing collectively 4 million Americans. Mr. Speaker, collectively the largest per capita of veterans in this country.
Does the gentlelady have a parliamentary inquiry?
I asked why they were not called. Have some respect. It's not going to take...
Gentlelady is recognized.
I asked why they were not called from the parliamentarian, please.
Delegates-elect and the resident commissioner-elect are not qualified to vote. Representatives-elect are the only individuals qualified to vote in the election of a speaker. As provided in Section 36 of the House Rules and Manual, the speaker is elected by a majority of the members-elect voting by surname.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This body and this nation has a territories and a colonies problem. What was supposed to be temporary has now effectively become permanent. We must do something about this problem so that these 4 million... But I have a voice. And
Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, Democrat from the Virgin Islands, on the House floor during the House Speaker election. After the House elected its Speaker, reelected Speaker Johnson, they moved on to doing a rules package. CQ roll call says that among the changes proposed by the Republicans, it requires that motions to force a vote on removing the Speaker be sponsored by 9 Republican members and prevents Democrats from offering such motions. It allows committees to use electronic voting and requires House officials to continue efforts to integrate artificial intelligence technologies into House operations and functions. It authorizes the chair of the Judiciary Committee to continue legal actions initiated by the Republican House in the 118th Congress, to issue subpoenas associated with certain Biden family investigations. It extends the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the U.S. and the Chinese Communist Party, and it provides for House consideration of 12 bills under closed rules in coming weeks, including 6 that are immigration-related. That summary from CQ Roll Call. Here's some of the floor debate. Congresswoman Michelle Fischbach, Republican from Minnesota.
Today, the House will consider a rules package governing how this body conducts its business in the 119th Congress. In November, the American people sent us a mandate grounded in limited government, fiscal restraint, individual freedom, and America First principles. Our constituents sent us to Washington to correct course from the previous 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, an administration that unleashed an onslaught of regulatory burden, woke policy, federal debt, and a porous southern border on the American taxpayer. Those taxpayers spoke with a clear and resounding message that change must happen. HRES 5 is the framework by which this body will deliver that change. The Constitution tasks this body with the governance of ourselves, ultimately accountable to the people we answer to every 2 years. With this rules package, we illustrate a House of Representatives that is modernized and efficient, yet accountable and transparent. It incorporates feedback from every corner of this body, updating those provisions which are unworkable or outdated, while maintaining core constitutional principles. I want to thank Speaker Johnson, parliamentarian staff, former Chairman Burgess's staff, and countless others who worked tirelessly to craft this package into what we will consider today. I also want to highlight some of the important changes in this rule package before I yield to Ranking Member McGovern. This rule package improves the way this body conducts its business through streamlining or improving internal processes to better reflect how the House of Representatives is supposed to operate. It raises the threshold by which a resolution declaring the office of the Speaker vacant may be offered, ensuring that such dramatic and seismic decisions are made through consensus and forethought, not by rogue personal vendettas and last-minute chaos. It continues to allow committees to permit the use of electronic voting and remote witnesses, speeding up the process by which bills are considered, and committees have access to expert witnesses for their respective hearings. In addition, the package continues to improve the committee electronic document repository, streamlining the process by which documents are posted by the committee on rules and committees of jurisdiction. Finally, the package continues to work regarding the appropriate use and integration of artificial intelligence in the operation and function of the House, ensuring members, offices, and staff have access to modern tools and resources. The resolution helps this body deliver on our mandate by the American people. The resolution requires that all general appropriations bills have a spending reduction account to help address the bloated federal budget and consequently the ever-growing federal debt burden. The package establishes several new provisions or points of order against measures that continue the unsustainable growth in federal spending and bureaucracy. As an example, members may raise a point of order against a bill that increases direct spending by $2.5 billion. It also requires CBO to provide information on the inflationary impacts of the legislation where possible. Finally, this package extends certain rules and authorizes to ensure the continuity of our important work in the 118th Congress. It extends the subpoena enforcement authority for the Judiciary's committee investigation into Attorney General Garland's production of documents related to Hunter Biden to ensure no one, including President Biden or his son, is above congressional accountability. It also extends the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the U.S. and China Communist Party to develop policies addressing the CCP's economic and geopolitical aggression. Finally, it provides for consideration several measures that represent the opening salvo of House Republicans' agenda: securing our border, energy independence, and protecting life and liberty. And I am proud to stand here today to bring forward this rules package and want to encourage my colleagues to support the resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Congresswoman Michelle Fischbach, Republican from Minnesota, on the House floor. Rising in opposition to the House rules package in this opening day of the 119th Congress, Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And I want to thank the gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. Fischbach, for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I first want to take issue with the word choice of the gentlelady from Minnesota, who kept on talking about a mandate, Republican mandate. Where's the mandate? Is it in the room with us? Maybe it's hiding under the table, but the last time I checked, Republicans actually lost seats in the House of Representatives. Republicans now have the slimmest majority in nearly 100 years. So, one would think, given the closeness of the election, that we would hear more about the importance of working together and bipartisanship. But you'd be wrong, and that's reflected in this rules package. Mr. Speaker, it's truly kind of unbelievable that we're at this moment right now. We're down here debating the revision to the revision of the rules package. This time, again, after Republicans worked out another backroom deal. And what concessions were so important to bring the House to a standstill while they redrafted their package once again? Well, the last-minute addition we were all just sitting around waiting for says that bipartisan suspension bills can't be debated on Thursday or Friday. Never mind if there's an emergency like a national disaster or a terror attack, we can't move quickly. That's actually why this extreme Republican majority wants to make this change. They hate bipartisanship. They hate bipartisanship. And what was the change they made earlier today? What was the big emergency? Changing words like child to son and daughter in our ethics rules. I mean, they're obsessed with this stuff. It's not just weird, it's discrimination. Meanwhile, a few months ago, we received over 40 rule change proposals at our member day hearing in the Rules Committee, and zero of them are included in this package. Instead, we get some last-minute backroom deal. Now, I'd love to hear why those ideas were all blocked, but we don't even have a rules chair to ask. We have no idea where any of this came from, and we had no time to review it all. So forget about the 72-hour rule. We didn't even get 72 minutes, and they're already making a mockery of this legislative process. And as I said, we don't have a chair of the Rules Committee. Usually at this moment, I would congratulate the new chair of the Rules Committee, but we're in the very odd situation of not having a chair of the Rules Committee right now. And I think that's just one small sign of the disarray and dysfunction that we've been seeing around here for the last few years. I mean, we're debating a rules package, and Republicans don't even have a chair of the Rules Committee in place. I mean, who wrote this? Who wrote this? Maybe the gentlewoman can tell us who wrote these rules. Maybe she can tell us who decided to block dozens of amendments from both sides of the aisle and the many bipartisan amendments which were blocked with no explanation at all. We know it was done in the back room somewhere with no accountability, and that's about all that we know. And speaking of back rooms, the only reason Speaker Johnson got enough votes is because two members emerged from a back room after huddling with the Speaker and changed their votes to support him. God only knows what they were promised in order to cave to change their views.
Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, ranking member on the Rules Committee on the House floor. Consideration of the House rules package, the rules changes proposed by the Republican majority during this opening of the 119th Congress. This is Washington today. Senate also convening for the new Congress. Washington Times writes the Senate under GOP control after Vice President Kamala Harris swore in senators who won their races in November. Senator John Thune, South Dakota Republican, making his debut as Majority Leader, opened the new session by acknowledging the victims of the New Year's attack in New Orleans and the death of President Jimmy Carter. He also welcomed new members and underscored the solemnity of the oath. He said it's the solemn responsibility of those of us here in Congress to preserve our Constitution, to guard it against enemies both foreign and domestic. He replaced Senator Charles E. Schumer of New York as Majority Leader and also replaced Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky as Republican Leader. That was from the Washington Times. Here's Vice President Kamala Harris presiding as President of the Senate as she started to swear in those members.
The chair lays before the Senate the certificates of the election of 32 senators elected for 6-year terms beginning on January 3rd, 2025. All certificates, the chair is advised, are in the form suggested by the Senate or contain all the essential requirements of the form suggested by the Senate. If there be no objection, the reading of the certificates will be waived and they will be printed in full in the record. If the senators to be sworn will now present themselves at the desk in groups of 4, as their names are called in alphabetical order, the chair will administer their oaths of office. The clerk will read the names of the first group.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso.
Senate floor today, Vice President Kamala Harris presiding as President of the Senate, first session of the 119th Congress convening. She did proceed to administer the oath to the senators-elect, 11 of them in all. There were 12 new senators elected, but one of them, Jim Justice, Republican of West Virginia, did not take the oath today. He plans to finish his term as West Virginia governor through January 13th, when the new governor will be sworn in. Senate did other opening day organizing steps, including swearing in the Senate President Pro Tem, Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, and passing resolutions providing for a joint meeting of Congress on Monday to count the presidential electoral college votes and to allow the late President Jimmy Carter, who died last weekend, to lie in state in U.S. Capitol Rotunda next week. Republicans now have a 53-47 majority over Democrats. The new Majority Leader, John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, said in his welcoming speech that he wanted to preserve the unique constitutional nature of the Senate.
Unfortunately, today there are a lot of people out there who would like to see the Senate turn into a copy of the House of Representatives. And that, Mr. President, is not what our founders intended or what our country needs. And one of my priorities as leader will be to ensure that the Senate stays the Senate. That means preserving the legislative filibuster, the Senate rule that today is perhaps the greatest impact on preserving the founders' vision of the United States Senate. It also means restoring the Senate as a place of discussion and deliberation. And that includes empowering committees, restoring regular order, and engaging in extended debate on the Senate floor where all members should have a chance to make their voices and the voices of their constituents heard. We have a lot to do this Congress. Border security, extending the tax relief Republicans delivered during the first Trump administration, lifting burdensome and expensive government regulations to help American businesses and families flourish, providing for our nation's defense in an increasingly unstable world, bringing appropriations bills to the floor for serious deliberation so that we make the best possible use of taxpayer dollars, an overdue farm bill to update farm programs for farmers and ranchers to reflect current agriculture needs. And, Mr. President, the list goes on. Mr. President, in past years, I've listened to speeches delivered by other leaders welcoming members to the new Congress and discussing the agenda for the coming months. I now find myself in the position of delivering that speech. My Republican colleagues have trusted me to lead our party and the Senate in the next Congress, and I will work every day to be worthy of that trust. My philosophy of leadership comes from my dad. He was a basketball coach at our high school, and he had some very strong opinions about the right way to play. Sports to him was not about personal glory. It was about elevating the team. He hated ball hogs. If someone else was in a better position to take the shot, you always made the extra pass. You didn't try to pad your own statistics. It's an attitude which I've tried to carry with me throughout my life. And it's an attitude I intend to carry with me to the leader office. My job is to be of service to my colleagues and to our country.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, on the Senate floor. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, was the Majority Leader in the previous Congress. He is now the Minority Leader.
First, welcome to all of my colleagues to the 119th Congress. I hope everyone had a blessed and happy start to the new year, full of family and loved ones. I was lucky enough to have just that. Today, the Senate begins a new chapter in its distinguished history. We begin our work at a moment of crossroads for our country. We convene at a time of uncertainty for American democracy, for America's economy, and for the future leadership of America on the world stage. These challenges that we face as a nation are great, and so must be our resolve. Let me first begin by acknowledging my friend and colleague, the former Republican leader, Senator McConnell. For as long as I've served as Democratic leader, he has sat opposite me across the aisle. As he transitions away from leadership, it was nice seeing him in the seat over there where he didn't have to get up all the time. I'd like to thank him for those important occasions when we worked together, despite our many fierce disagreements. Let me also congratulate another colleague, our new Republican leader, John Thune. Leader Thune and I have served in this chamber for a long time. I know he is a good and decent American, someone who loves his country, as we all do. I know he just became leader a moment ago, so I hope he doesn't mind if I offer some unsolicited advice. The Majority Leader sets the tone, and that tone determines to a large extent how successful we'll be moving forward. If we look back at all the bills we passed in 2021, and 2022, most of them originated in the Senate because both parties found ways to reach across the aisle. I want to work with the new Republican leader to keep that bipartisan streak going in the new year. I don't expect we'll agree on everything or even many things, but there will still be opportunities to improve the lives of the American people if we're willing to work together. So today I congratulate Leader Thune and look forward to serving alongside him in the 119th Congress. Let me also congratulate all our returning colleagues who've just taken their oaths of office. It's a great honor to serve in this chamber with you. The work we do in this chamber has the potential to create enormous prosperity for millions of American people, if we do our jobs right.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor on this opening day of the 119th Congress. There was a record broken today. Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, is now the longest-serving African-American in the Senate. He is starting his 13th year. The previous record holder was Republican Senator Edward Brooke of Massachusetts, who served 12 years, 1967 through 78. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Listening to programs on C-SPAN through C-SPAN Radio is easy. Tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio, and listen to Washington Journal daily at 7 a.m. Eastern. Important public affairs events throughout the day. And weekdays, catch Washington Today. Listen to C-SPAN anytime. Just tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. President Joe Biden writes Associated Press has rejected the nearly $15 billion proposed deal for Nippon Steel of Japan to purchase Pittsburgh-based U.S. Steel, affirming his vow in March to block the acquisition. He said in a Friday morning statement, "We need major U.S. companies representing the major share of U.S. steelmaking capacity to keep leading the fight on behalf of America's national interests." His decision comes after the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, known as CFIUS, failed to reach consensus on the possible national security risks of the deal last month. and sent a long-awaited report on the merger to President Biden, who had 15 days to reach a final decision, reporting from Associated Press. John Kirby, White House National Security Communications Advisor, spoke about this decision in a news conference online.
There have been reports that, Biden, or that their top Biden officials wanted this deal to go through, including folks like Jake at the White House or some others. And so wondering, why were their, arguments, why was Biden not convinced by their arguments? What was it that, made him sort of go against that advice? And also quickly in the statement at the end, the president says, he wouldn't hesitate to protect security of this nation, infrastructure, as well as resilience of supply chains. But he postponed this decision until after the election. He held off on making a final call here for many months. And so, did election results play a part in waiting until now? And, why, if he felt so confident about this before, obviously we've seen Karine and others say, this was always going to be a U.S. run company, that he wouldn't let it fall into other hands. And why wait until now to make the final call? Thanks.
Alex, on your first question, I'm not going to get into internal interagency deliberations about this one way or another. As the president said yesterday, the Committee of National Security and Economic Experts assessed that there was a national security risk at play here, and the president is acting against that risk. And as the president said in his statement yesterday, that is the sole reason he made this decision, that he believed it was and remains important for a company like U.S. Steel, which is so critical to our own supply chains here at home. And one of the things, that he's done since coming into office in the wake of the pandemic was to shore up American supply chains and make them more resilient. And as he has said many times, having more and more of our supply chains begin at home. And that really drove his decision-making. It was, as he said himself, a decision based on his view as Commander-in-Chief and as President of the United States, that it was important to keep this most critical company with the capabilities it possesses in American hands, and American-owned. And he made this decision after receiving the analysis by the Committee of National Security and Economic Experts that CFIUS represents, and after taking due deliberation to consider that, plus the views, of course, of his team, his economic team, his national security team, his domestic security team, all that weighed into what he finally ended up deciding to do.
John Kirby, National Security Communications Advisor at the White House during a virtual news conference. Reuters writes in a statement, Nippon and U.S. Steel blasted Biden's decision, calling it a clear violation of due process and a political move, and saying they would take all appropriate action to protect their legal rights. Pittsburgh-based U.S. Steel had warned that thousands of jobs would be at risk without the deal, but the United Steelworkers Union, which opposed the merger from the outset, praised Biden's decision, with the president, David McCall, saying the union has no doubt that it's the right move for our members and our national security. And Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, posting on X, blocking the sale of a struggling company to a stronger company simply steals value from what's left of U.S. Steel and hurts its remaining workers by blocking the billion-dollar infusion of cash Nippon Steel promises. But outgoing Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat of Ohio, posting on X, the deal was made behind closed doors without workers at the table. It represented a clear threat to America's national and economic security and our ability to enforce our trade laws. It's why we fought it every step of the way. The president is right to block it. Wall Street today, the Dow up 339, NASDAQ up 340, S&P up 73. CBS News writes President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will visit New Orleans on Monday following the terrorist attack on Bourbon Street on New Year's Day that left at least 14 dead and dozens more injured. White House said the president and First Lady will grieve with the families and community members impacted by the tragic attack on January 1st and meet with officials on the ground. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre spoke more about this at her briefing today at the White House.
In the coming days, the President and First Lady will travel to New Orleans, Louisiana. The President and First Lady will grieve with the families and community members impacted by the tragic attack on January 1st and meet with local and state officials on the ground. The President has been extremely focused on ensuring that everything possible be done to complete this investigation, ensure the safety of the community, and provide any and all federal assistance to support state and local officials. Since Wednesday, the President has held regular meetings with his Homeland Security team to receive the latest information on the investigation and convey the need to do everything possible to complete this investigation and keep the American people safe. The President has also spoken to the mayor of New Orleans and the governor of Louisiana to offer support to both state and local officials. His team remains in close touch with their teams. And as the President said earlier today, you heard him moments ago, he has spoken with the families of the victims. As he made clear, there is no justification for violence of any kind, and we will not tolerate any attack on any of our nation's communities. The President continues to receive regular updates on both the investigation into the terrorist attack in New Orleans and the truck explosion in Las Vegas. Both cases remain active investigations, and I will refer you to the law enforcement to speak further about them.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre speaking with reporters at the White House press conference. Security has been tightened in Washington following the terror attack in New Orleans and the truck explosion outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, especially given the upcoming high-profile events. Next week's the state funeral of former President Jimmy Carter and the counting of the presidential electoral college ballots by a joint meeting of Congress, which was already a matter of concern given the attack on the U.S. Capitol 4 years ago. And in a couple of weeks, we have the presidential inauguration. Today, there was a news conference with D.C. Police, Capitol Hill Police, Secret Service, FBI, and the National Guard. Here's a few questions to U.S. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger.
Brad Bell with Channel 7. So I don't know who wants to take this one, perhaps Chief Manger. Look, obviously the political dynamic is different this time than it was 4 years ago for January 6th. But do you see any possibility that there could be any sort of disruption like we saw back then? Is there any intelligence that anybody's coming to town? Do you have any expectation? Could it happen again? That's 5 questions.
5 questions. There's no credible intelligence that we expect a mass demonstration like we had 4 years ago. Anytime you ask a question about, what intelligence and what we are reacting to from the intelligence community, it always ends with, but there's always the lone wolf, always the person who's operating by themselves, and you have no warning about those individuals. That's what occurred in this past few days. These were folks that were by themselves, there was no way for anybody to know about what they were planning. So we need to be prepared for that as much as we need to be prepared for anything. There are several permitted demonstrations. There's some chatter about some other folks and conspiracy theorists, talking about, well, if this happens, we need to be at the Capitol, those kinds of things. But again, no indication that that hotels are filling up with these people, that these people are traveling to D.C. But the threat environment is heightened at a level that all of us are on high alert. All of us are being very proactive in terms of the preventive measures that we're putting into place.
You also have a hard perimeter.
We do, which again, that's part of the layered security that we have for the Capitol.
Chief, while you're up there, two quick questions. How long will the fencing stay up around the Capitol? Will that stay up through past January 20, or when do you expect that?
It'll stay up through the inauguration.
And then for the visitation, the viewing for President Carter and the weather that might be impacting that, can you just tell people what they might expect if there would be long lines that stretch out into the street and outside of the Capitol, how you'll be preparing for weather for that?
So typically, there are long lines for the state funerals. Folks do queue up outside and they should expect to be able to deal with the elements. And if anybody here can answer about how to, restore order when this city gets 5 to 8 inches of snow, then I'd like to hear the answer to that.
U.S. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger at a news conference today in Washington, along with the D.C. Police Chief and officials from the Secret Service and FBI. President Joe Biden today is awarding the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, to 7 U.S. Army veterans for heroism during the Korean War and Vietnam War. Ahead of the formal ceremony, the president met with the recipients in the Oval Office.
Folks, I wanted you to come in because these 8 men have done things that are changing not only their lives, the lives of families that were able to celebrate Christmas, what they did. They saved children, they saved people in serious distress, they jumped into freezing water. They did it all. And I think it's very important that the public see them and know who they are. I know you have all their backgrounds, but what they did, they allowed people to continue their lives in ways that they never would have been able to. There's a lot fewer empty chairs around the kitchen table and dining table because of what these guys did. And what they did is amazing. They literally put their lives at risk, some of them at the point that you wonder how they could have had the nerve to do it. In addition to that, I want to thank their families, because if you're the spouse of a firefighter or a police officer, you always worry about that phone call, that one phone call you're going to get when they know the alarm went off. And so I want to thank them, because I'm confident they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing without the support of their spouses and their families. So thank you guys, I really mean it. You're the best America has to offer. I'm so damn proud to stand with you.
President Joe Biden with the Medal of Honor recipients in the White House Oval Office. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.